A problem that I think we had and the industry had is the lack of data integrity. You just don't know.
And the leasing agents are not making it any better when they write something on a post-it note.
Exactly, and just give it to them or
they
text
chase
him.
Johnny down. A leasing agent is someone that's there to sell apartments. This is how they make a living, selling apartments and servicing the residents. They have zero vested interest in closing your work orders.
The only way to complete a work order is for it to be assigned to the technician and for the technician to close it out. There is no complete button. There's an assign button. Once it's assigned to the technician, only the technician can complete it. And even from there, again, they have to complete it from their phone. In order for the technician to close it out, the technician has to upload a photo and a comment. Here's a picture of the new air filter, and then the comment is, I replaced the air filter.
I think operators forget that an institutional size property, it's a business that's already been scaled. When you have 100 to 300 units in one place, that's a business that's already been scaled.
There's nothing more demoralizing than if I am a hardworking maintenance technician who works my butt off, completes all those work orders, and my maintenance supervisor is the one putting them into the system and taking credit for it. The industry thinks about centralization as the solution, right? Meaning there's a problem, and well, if we scale it, if we centralize it, we'll fix the problem. I think it's very different, I think.
Sean, once again, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Adrian. Great being here.
Before starting this technology journey, right? You had a large portfolio, thousands of units under management. How did you assess your technicians' performance?
That's a great question. It's actually really funny. I don't think we were unique in the way we did things.
No, but I think it's telling, right, for the industry in general, because I agree with you. I don't think there's a uniqueness, and I kind of anticipate what you're going to say, but
I think, yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people have been doing this just because there was no better way. But I know that the best use case was, or scenario where somebody comes and asks for a raise. And the regional would, pass it back to us and said, hey, Johnny wants a raise. And, I'd go back and say, okay, does Johnny deserve a raise? And well, yeah, I feel like he does. And it always bothered me because it always it was always right. Well, it was always based on their intuition. It was based on or no, he doesn't deserve a raise because, and I'd be like, why? Well, because, he had a few residents that complained about him. Okay, well, what's a few? How many? And what percentage of those residents that complained, how many residents, so to speak, didn't complain? How many residents were happy? As we all know, residents not calling the office every time Johnny does a good job. They're only going to call the office to complain when he does a bad job, right?
People only call when something's wrong.
Right. So then why are we just giving out raises or lack thereof, right? Or not granting raises based on our feelings? But I think that's what we did as a company. It was based on our feelings. It was based on what we felt the person deserved or the person didn't deserve. And I think that's what a lot of the industry does or did, just based on their people's intuition.
Yeah, I have a similar story, probably more than one, but I want to stick to one of them.
Okay.
So I just took over a portfolio of about 10,000 units. And it was a newly created director position. In my first meeting with with top management, president of the company, vice president, all the regionals, I've asked, please share with me what's your main concern, or what are the main concerns with maintenance? And the answer was, there's just a lot of work. We don't seem to get ahead. So I said, could you be please more specific? What do you mean by there's a lot of work? We just see a pile of work orders, the work orders are piling up. Okay. Do you see how many incoming work orders for the particular portfolio or property you're thinking of? Do you see how many they're completed in a day? Do you divide that by the number of team members, right? To check any type of productivity to see how many tickets per day, per tech are being completed at that particular asset. And it was crickets. Nobody had the slightest idea.
I'll take it even the next step though. Even if they would have an idea, right? I mean, what we realize as an operator is all that data is flawed. So I am looking in the system and seeing how many work orders everybody did. But it's going to show that they did less work orders than they truly did because they're not actually going into the system and closing out all their work orders per se. Where somebody else is going in and just marking them as complete. The manager's marking them as complete and not saying Johnny actually did it because, we don't know. Or, again, Johnny's he's running around the property and half the work orders don't even end up in the system because the residents keep pulling him aside, say, oh, can you do this and can you do this and can you do this? And then, again, it's kind of a problem that I think we had and the industry had is the lack of data integrity. You just don't know.
And the leasing agents are not making it any better when they write something on a post-it
note. Exactly, and just give it to them or
text him. They chase Johnny down.
Right, or they just text him, hey,
no, it's even easier, right? They just text something and he's supposed to, of that text message, to resolve.
You contrast that with the leasing process, it's just like, it's impossible to move somebody into a unit, practically impossible, right? Without that being recorded in your management system, right? So there's going to be a lease, there's going to be a move-in, right? There's going to be an activity, all right? And I'm going to know who went ahead and did that. Whereas, again, on the maintenance side, you could have 50% of your work orders just happening without you even knowing that anything's happening. And then, obviously, you look at the data on the technicians who are performing and it looks like everybody's doing nothing, but then you also want to know, well, what's going on the asset, right? What are my top issues, right? You're budgeting or whatever it is you want to do a training for your team. Well, what are the most popular work orders? And then it's not what are the most popular work orders, you're looking at what are the most popular work orders that are going through the system, which could be a very different answer of what the true most common work orders that you're having.
I'm going to go back to data integrity in just a second. I wanted to share here with the audience the continuation of that conversation I had with the leadership at a particular company I work for. I started doing an audit, and we use Yardi. That was the PMS. Yardi did not have a report built like I wanted to be built to reflect the numbers that they operate in a certain way. They had, some typical reports that none of them was what I wanted. So basically, I had to build one in an Excel spreadsheet from scratch. And what that actually shows is that every morning at opening time, I will manually check every single property and look at their pending work order numbers and plug them into the Excel. I will do this exercise Monday to Thursday. I will do it twice on Friday, a.m. at opening and then 6 o'clock at closing. When I first start tracking them, I think we were like the average per property at the end of the week at week closing, they were like high 30s or like high 30s, let's just say 35, 37 per property. 6 months in, we're able to get them from like 30 plus to like single digits. And you're talking about a portfolio of about 30 plus properties. We kept it at single digits average numbers for 95 weeks in a row. Most of the 95 weeks were during COVID. We created this very powerful accountability tool that did two things, okay? The first thing that it did, it created a lot of employee turnover. A lot of employees did not want any accountability. They literally just walked out, right? But then there was another part of the workforce that absolutely love it. I will have service managers at like 5:55 p.m. literally blowing up my phone saying, I have a stack of work orders in my hand. I've been so busy, I didn't get a chance to go back to my desk and close them. Would you please allow me the courtesy to close them? And I'll text you when they're all closed in the system. And don't pull my number right at 6. And I said, of course, I want for you to get the credit for the work you did. There were some of them that were obsessed with closing at 0 every single Friday. They would like take a garbage disposal at like 5:57 and run and do it. And they'll text me to say, no, we're closing at 0. I'm actually now taking the last work order. How incredible is that?
It's fascinating. And, I think somebody in the industry, told me this. When I asked them if I can credit them, they said that they didn't come up with it, but they said it's a famous quote. I just never heard it. But essentially the line was, bowling isn't fun if you don't know the score. Right. And I think that just it's so important. I think that's exactly what you were just saying is, once your team, so to speak, knew the score, right? Knew where they were, where they needed to get to, all of a sudden the engagement just skyrocketed, right? People actually, it became fun, right? Maintenance became fun, which is, typically in the industry known as a more daunting part of the industry, a less fun part of the industry. All of a sudden you can make it more engaging, more exciting, by just simply, having the data, showing your teams the data, and recognizing them.
As much as we're talking about us drowning in technology, I wanted to say that I've created a facilities leadership group that has over 200 members, and we're meeting every other Wednesday. All leaders combined manage or oversee over 2 million units.
Wow.
So there's a lot of units like in that virtual room or in that council. And then I wanted to say that, based on the conversations that we have, it still doesn't sound to me like there's a lot of progress that has been made. Maybe there is a lot, but there's still ways to go when it comes to like moving from printing out something on a piece of paper and doing manual dispatch. So I want to start with data integrity and just say, a regular PMS, service manager will come in the morning, they'll print the pending tickets, distribute them to the team, things happen during the day. Let's say the bunch of tickets end up on a leasing agent desk or someone in the office, they put them on their desk, and that person, which has zero vested interest into performing that task. A leasing agent is someone that's there to sell apartments. This is how they make a living, selling apartments and servicing the residents. They have zero vested interest in closing your work orders. So they end up with a pile of tickets, on a desk. More often than not, those stay there until the next day, or God knows for how long. They don't get touched because, again, they're not going to be a priority for that particular individual. And then the maintenance team does not get a credit for the work they do. A lot of manual work here, a lot of trees that, we're killing still. And whenever the leasing agent gets to it, they click the complete button more often than not. So there's no time being spent. That's being tracked. There's no notes. Or maybe you'll find a note that says complete and nothing besides complete. What's your approach on data integrity here?
Yeah, I think you're bringing up a much larger problem. Obviously, data integrity is at the core of it, but I think something is just mind-blowing to me that we're in 2025 and some of the largest property management companies today are still using pen and paper to close out work orders and to track their work orders. They're still printing out work orders. It's mind-blowing. It's crazy how much, just take one aspect of, and there's so many digital tools out there today. So just take one aspect of that, think about how much time back and forth your team spends coming to the office back and forth on a given day to get their work orders, to update on a work order or something like that. Or they wait until the end of the day, and then by the time the work orders get back to the office and paper, they're all crunched up and have coffee stains or who knows what. But it's just so crazy, just the amount of time that's spent with paper work orders where the person has to go do the work, come back to the office, drop it off, and then plant it on somebody's desk who you then hope is going to enter it into the PMS at some point in the near future. Obviously, like you said, you're getting little notes, little data. You have no idea in the system who actually did the work, what work was done. It's mind-blowing to me that this is where we are in the industry. Again, there's so many tools out there, but obviously as one of those tools, it creates so much opportunity for us. So it's really exciting to be a part of the solution for something that's so fundamental, so core of the industry, that the industry is just still, again, they're centuries old with the way they operate. But yeah, I think that's the mind-blowing part. And then obviously the other part is just it's obviously frustrating to see because there's so many tools and there's so much data that you can collect, let alone the integrity of the data. That's even more so. But just to know, again, who's doing what, when it was actually done in real time, not 3 days later when somebody got around to closing it out. Even seeing the picture of the completed work, all that stuff that you can't do on pen and paper.
Sean, back to data integrity. I want you to share, how do you approach data integrity at AppWork? What have you done as a PropTech company focused on maintenance management? how have you approached the data integrity part? Because to me, that's extremely important, because you can judge performance, you can build KPIs with data that's corrupted. And it goes back to that old saying, garbage in, garbage out, right? So we need to stop the garbage in order to have better data coming out.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that there's two components. I mean, number one is even just in the idea of creating an app for the maintenance teams that's easy to use, that they're going to use. And I think some of the other technology that's on the market today is just cumbersome. And I think, it's hard to get people to adopt it. Obviously, you're going to have no data integrity if people aren't going to be able to use the platform that you have. So that was number one for us, is just creating an incredibly simple app. Same idea, same mindset of Google Maps or Uber, or these platforms where you can download the app and figure out how to use it with no training whatsoever. So that was kind of step one. Once we had that, and we kind of had a platform where the teams are actually using it, the next part is to create it in a way that nobody, not the technician nor a manager, nobody can manipulate the data. I don't think people do it maliciously. I think things just happen in property management, and, property manager thinks that, again, it's a really old work order, I'm just going to go ahead and close it out. And if the resident has an issue, they'll reopen it, right? I think that's a pretty standard thought process. But then, a regional manager wants to pull how many open work orders they have, and all of a sudden we no longer have any clue. So what happens within our system, and I don't think we're the only system that does it, I think it's pretty straightforward. It's not rocket science, in how we do what we do. But obviously understanding that work orders can be submitted in any way by an admin, by the property manager, but also from the resident directly. And that happens with residents. If they're on Yardi, they're likely using Rent Cafe, right? Whatever app the resident already has. So number one, that's a big thing, just from a data integrity perspective, the fact that I know my residents can submit work orders, right? Because if it's in the office, then I have this barrier where resident has to email the office or call the office, and then the office has to put it in. They have to put it in and write it the same way that the resident said it, so that you don't have any issues of broken telephone. And obviously, if the resident submits a work order on the weekend, no one's seeing it until Monday. If the team puts it in Monday, but they're probably really overwhelmed Monday, they may not get into Monday afternoon or Tuesday. So that's solution number one, is just creating an environment where your residents are submitting the work orders directly. Solution number two is create an environment where the only way to complete those work orders are for the maintenance teams to complete them. So one of the things that we built within AppWork is there's actually no complete button inside of our software. The only way to complete a work order is for it to be assigned to the technician and for the technician to close it out. Obviously, if it's assigned to a vendor, there are ways to close them out, but on a typical work order, there is no complete button. There's an assign button. Once it's assigned to the technician, only the technician can complete it. And even from there, again, they have to complete it from their phone. And then as an extra layer of data integrity, in order for the technician to close it out, the technician has to upload a photo and a comment. So they have to say, here's a picture of the new air filter, and then the comment is, I replaced the air filter. Then we added another layer of data integrity on top of that, where that comment, where the technician says, I replaced the air filter, gets emailed directly to the resident. So the resident gets an email now that says, hey, Johnny, replace your air filter. The technician obviously knows that. The system actually tells them that, hey, this will be sent to the resident. So now take a technician, if they didn't truly complete that work order, they're going to think twice before going ahead and marking it complete. Obviously, it's going to be very difficult because they have to take the photo and the comment, but they also know that comment's being emailed directly to the resident. Then we added on top of that two more layers, where the resident can then go ahead and leave a rating and a review. So if a technician completes a work order that wasn't done or wasn't done properly, instead of them marking it as complete, right, we don't want them to, but let's just say they do that, well, then they know that if this wasn't done properly, the resident's going to give me a 1-star rating. So I don't want to go ahead and mark that as complete until it's truly done. And the other thing that the resident could do, the resident can call back that work order entirely. So, we actually see a fair share of work orders when a company first launches our product where work orders are called back, and the resident, when they call it back, they have to put in a reason. And the resident says, the reason is no one showed up. Right? And you'd be surprised how many work orders are called back because no one actually showed up. But very quickly after using our platform, the technicians realize that by closing out the work order before they actually go to the unit, right, they're not solving or helping themselves in any way, because the work order is going to end up reopened anyways, and now they just look bad because they have a callback, so to speak, against them. But those are all these different layers that we built from a data integrity perspective. So like this, as an operator, I always know my true number of open work orders because the residents are ultimately the ones that control it. right? They can create those work orders. They could reopen those work orders. In order to complete it, again, I wouldn't call them loops to go through or hoops to go through. It's really simple. And just if you think about it, once a client launches the platform, it's all just basic common knowledge, right? Why would a property manager need to close out a work order? It's being closed out by the person who actually did the works. Like this, if a year from now I have a question on this work order, I know exactly who to go to.
You mentioned technician ratings. I think the client's ability to rate the service is incredibly important and powerful because it creates an accountability level that did not exist at all in the industry. And I'm just thinking, I go back to Uber.
Yeah.
And then when I order a car using the Uber app, I'm looking at a driver, and then if it's not 4.6, 7, 8 at least, and I had drivers that actually had 10,000 rides with 5-star, which it blew my mind. That's a story for the next episode, but that was an incredible experience that I had with that particular driver, like a fanatic. He would do whatever it took to get a 5-star rating. He was that focused, that determined. And I think this could create a system for us internally, obviously, to rate our technicians and create some recognition for ones that are doing great. But I also think that this could be something that could be used in a model, Uber for maintenance. By that, I'm thinking a marketplace that actually collects information from technicians, from professionals that don't want to have a full-time engagement. They're signing on an Uber for maintenance platform, just like the drivers are doing on Uber. There's a pre-screening process, just like for the Uber drivers is too. Use similar methods to get them pre-screened and then make them available to property management companies.
Yeah. If you asked me where I think the future of the industry is going to be in 10 years from now, first I would tell you if I knew the answer to that, I'd be living on an island. But after I told you that, I'd probably say that I think that's going to be the future, so to speak, of work for our industry. I think technicians are going to like the flexibility behind it. I also think that operators are going to like the flexibility behind it because right now you kind of have a hard staffing model, which is why companies tend to centralize because they're trying to figure out how do I offset that? How do I, have specialized skill sets and things like this. And we could talk more about the centralization model and how that's working for the industry. I think that this is a much more successful model. Today, I'm having a lot of open work orders. I have a lot of move-ins coming up Friday. So I don't have to have my 2 guys now work like crazy, burn them out, pay them a crazy overtime to get it done. I could just go into some kind of mobile app and say, all right, I need 7 more people here today. And these are already people that are, that are pre-vetted, like you said, skilled, trained. I have data to know that I'm getting the right people in. I can see different operating models behind it. It could be every property will still have, so to speak, their main maintenance supervisor as the core person running the property. But then that maintenance supervisor would have, so to speak, the leeway to bring on as many of these, call it Uber technicians, if you want to call them that they could just bring on whenever they need help to make sure that work orders are getting done right away, to make sure that turns are being turned promptly. And like this, again, same time during the winter where maybe I'm turning less units and have less going on, I'm not paying the payroll for those people. So I think it's going to be a big win both sides for the industry. I think one of the things that technology companies such as ourselves are going to have to solve before that becomes a reality is how to fill the knowledge gap. Because right now on the maintenance side, there's a tremendous wealth of knowledge that a technician has. The longer they're with a property, they have historical context of the property. They know where the shut-off valves are. They know where this is. They know that. And there's a lot of information that this person has. They remember, oh yeah, the last time I went into this unit and fixed this issue, that was the issue. So when I go in there next, or I have a work order now, all right, here's how I'm going to fix it. Here's what I'm going to do differently. So I think there's a ton of information that we need to make more accessible to the technicians before the industry starts adopting a model like that. But I'll be honest with you, it's something that we've been thinking about for quite some time, and it's something that we hope to get to.
I think you're a visionary here, really. I've been seeing this coming from a long distance. I do want to say when it comes to legacy knowledge, because that's what you describe, a person that's been at the property for a long time, they detain a lot of information they have on them. But then, if that person is not around where they live that particular property, there's no legacy knowledge. That's just gone. So the question, the curiosity that I have here is, how do we capture that legacy knowledge? What's a good way to use technology to capture that legacy knowledge? Because in all reality, we've been losing it at a higher and higher and higher rate year after year after year. So there's not a whole lot left out there.
Yeah. Well, I think organically, as people start adopting technology and they go to a digital maintenance platform, that data is all of a sudden now being saved and stored somewhere, right? So, hey, here's what happened in this unit. Here's what we did to fix it, right? As long as people are using the platform correctly, you now have that historical data on the actual work orders. So I think that's the solution is really in front of us now. What the companies need to do, which we already do, is just make that data easily accessible to the technician. So, like for example, in our platform, and I'm pretty sure other platforms have a similar idea. If I'm in a unit to replace a refrigerator, right, or there's an issue with a work order relating to a refrigerator, I can easily pull up when was the last time this refrigerator broke, what was the issue, who fixed it, and what did they do to fix it, right? What was the resolution there? Were there any parts that they had to order, things like that? Did they replace any parts? Or just that data alone, I think gets us about 50% of the way there. And then the other data that call it the legacy data is just information about the asset as a whole, right? Basic information, though, sometimes is just, like a new technician doesn't know off the top of their head. I don't know, the kind of plumbing that you have, the kind of pipes, and maybe there's two phases. Maybe phase one was built in 1975 and the other one is built in 1993. And there's different plumbing fixtures and different plumbing types at the two different phases. And, the kind of just all the asset data, if you want to call it that, right, where the shutoff valves are, right? Just there's so much information that, I think right now lives in people's head. And I think that's most of the information that lives in people's heads. That's a little harder for us to extract. But, we're working on solutions for that, really basic solutions, just, essentially. I mean, the way it would work is, a property, so to speak, would sign up for the platform. They'd just go in, there'd be like this, literally called this asset data form where they just go fill out a bunch of information about the property. And it could be they don't have all that information right away and they can populate that as time goes on. But like this, the client or the system has a way of pulling that information and then could surface that information to the technician when they need it, essentially. So if they're in a work order and they need to shut off the water, we can say, oh, by the way, here's the location of the shutoff valves. But then something that you've mentioned a few times, I mean, once you have that data, you can build one of the most customized, incredible AI models, right? It has all the information about the property, has all the historical context of all the issues that this unit has had and what the resolutions for those. And it could take those combined and tell the technician, here's exactly what to do, how to fix it. Here's what we tried last time. Here's why it didn't work. Here's what you should try to do now to fix it. And here's how to do it, right? Go behind to the boiler room on the bottom left. You'll see the shutoff valve. Go do that first, then go do this. And you can build such an incredible AI model based off that data.
I can think of a fairly easy and affordable way to collect that legacy knowledge where there's a situation to have someone, an employee, with that knowledge. You buy a GoPro camera and you have them going around the property, literally looking at the asset and speaking, describing where they at, what they're doing, what they're looking at, capture that entire thing and use AI to actually build that property data for you.
I think it's 100%, by the way, and that can be a very simple solution in terms of how that data becomes populated. I think at the end of the day, though, I think a lot of the legacy data, and I think even for ourselves, we don't even know what a lot of that is. And I think the technician or the technicians or the maintenance teams today, they don't either know what it is. That's information that comes to them when they're in the work order. Or here's a scenario. And like if you would have asked them about that, give me, I don't know, some of the information specific to this asset, they would never have thought about all of a sudden you mentioned beehives in the roof, and now they remembered, oh yeah, 4 years ago we had beehives in the roof, and it's because the way the builders built the building is there was this kind of loop, and we ended up fixing it in this way, but it didn't work, so we had to call the roofers out, which, by the way, that fix probably should still be under warranty. I have to go check, and oh, who are the roofers? Oh yeah, we called John's, roofing. If you say, oh, fill out this form on legacy data, right? Or go walk around the property and fill us in about all the information you could give us on the property, something like that's never going to come up, right? And I think that's the thing that we have to figure out how to truly capture that. Obviously, yes, having historical context on work orders, right? Then that's great. But sometimes there's major things, again, like a warranty on a small roof repair that's not tracked in any other way that no one would even think about or remember, because it had nothing to do with the roofs. It was for a bees work order, right? A pest control related work order. So that's the kind of data that we have to figure out how to capture. And I think that's, yeah, I don't have an answer to that yet.
I like to go next towards something you mentioned earlier, centralization. Big buzzword, right? How much is it, reality and effectiveness? How much is it hype? I don't share any thoughts yet, but I like to get your thoughts, general thoughts on centralization. Share some of mine and just kind of like, I want to get deep into the centralization.
Yeah, I think centralization is important. I think, where we are in the industry, I think we're all trying to, especially in today's economic climate, we have to figure out how to operate more efficiently. We have to figure out how can we be smarter. How can we disrupt and change the way things were being done and do things differently? I think it's really important to figure out. I can tell you as a former operator, we've tried it. It didn't go very well for us. We ended up shutting it down. We ended up spending millions of dollars on a failed project. I cannot tell you how to do it, but I can tell you what to look out for and what not to do.
All for you to share that, because it's not very often. And by the way, I just know of a very large operator that has tried a centralized program and they've invested incredible amount of money in it. They're pulling back from it now. So,
and by the way, we did this before the word centralization was even a thing in the industry. We did this back in, I think it was late 2017. We probably ran it for about a year and a half until we ended up shutting it down. But we were trying this. Our CEO was a big believer in the concept of centralization, and still today trying to figure out how to do it successfully. But it was easier said than done.
Yeah, tell me about some things that to look for, or like some of the stuff that you tried, like specifics, and you learned that it didn't work.
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, there's a few things. I mean, I could talk, this in and of itself can be a 2-hour conversation. But I think for us, we thought that to centralize maintenance, we had to do two things. Number one is we had to centralize the team, and we also had to centralize our maintenance shops. I don't know why at the time we thought that was what was needed, but we essentially did both at the same time, which caused a lot of confusion, a lot of issues. And that was, so to speak, mistake number one, is those are each massive projects in and of itself. We had a large portfolio in one market, and we figured, hey, if we can centralize and have one core, so to speak, maintenance shop, right? Everything is being ordered out of that shop. We can, standardize everything that we're ordering, order much higher quantities, bigger discounts, right? We'll have less work orders waiting on parts because it's easier to stock, a shop for 10 properties, right, than it is to stock a shop for one property. So we had, I guess all these thought processes, but we realized that we essentially became a hardware store, right? And we are literally running a fully functional business. And we actually structured it as a business. It was literally created. It was called Central Maintenance LLC, which is an entity that we created. We got like a warehouse, which is where we stored everything. We stored everything, and we had to track everything coming in and coming out so we can know which property to bill for. I mean, again, we're a property management company. We don't know how to build and create stores and shops, so to speak. And we ended up with just a lot of unaccounted for things. Stocking it ended up, in theory, it sounded great, but we realized every property was so nuanced and the parts that it needed. And we actually found that we were running out of parts more often than we weren't. That in and of itself is, again, a whole topic and a conversation, but that's, so to speak, mistake one is, I think each of those are massive undertakings. So they should be done separately. I think we made a mistake by trying to do that together. Another thing that we also realized on the centralized maintenance component, meaning within centralizing our teams itself, today when you're running a non-centralized operation, number one, something that's really important. If you ever you'll actually notice the maintenance teams have a tremendous amount of pride in their property. Right, especially like when they see something on the floor, they're going to pick it up. The property looks good. They're going to feel good about themselves, right? They get to know the residents. The residents know them. There is a certain rapport that they have. We found that when we centralized our team, we lost all of that. The maintenance teams were no longer associated with a property. They're associated with a pod, with a group, with a market. And they'd go to a property, see something on the floor. It's not my problem, right? This property doesn't, my job is to close out as many work orders as I can. So I'm going to go and close out as many work orders. I no longer care, so to speak, not in a malicious way, but it wasn't their focus. It wasn't their priority. It became a big challenge for us where we had nobody taking ownership of the property from a maintenance perspective. Again, I mean, they saw issues. They saw a roof leak. It's not the work order to assign to me. I don't care. It's not my problem, right? They saw, I mean, right now we all know the maintenance is the eyes and ears of every property that we have, right? But now all of a sudden I took the eyes and ears off the property, right? So now when a maintenance person saw something in a unit, they no longer came and reported that back to the office. They didn't care. Another big mistake that we made, and I could go on, there's a lot of these mistakes. But one more that I'll say that I found is today in a non-centralized environment, the maintenance supervisor reports up to the property manager. Now you can say that, hey, that in and of itself doesn't make so much sense, right? What does a property manager know about maintenance, and how are they qualified to be able to manage a maintenance team? And those are valid questions. Although I will say that I think the best leaders are people that hire people that know things that they don't know and still know how to manage them, right? So I think a good property manager will figure out how to manage their maintenance team without actually having to know how to fix things. But all of a sudden, when we centralized, right, we created this whole internal maintenance hierarchy infrastructure where you have these technicians that report up to somebody else who's essentially leading the centralized operation there, and they no longer report to the site staff. And I can't tell you how many move-ins we missed because we didn't know, or the property managers didn't know who to talk to. I can no longer, if I have an upcoming move-in, I can no longer call my maintenance supervisor and say, hey, I have 3 move-ins. I need you to get this done. Now the managers, they don't know who to call. There was nobody, responsible for that on their end. They didn't have or even if they did have somebody to call, that person wasn't taking ownership because it wasn't their property, right? So even if they call somebody running, so to speak, the centralized maintenance operation or whoever it was, whoever the structure was, that person was responsible for sending people out. Again, my job here is to get the work orders done, and obviously to turn units. But it wasn't like, hey, if the unit's not going to be ready, I'm going to make sure that I'm going to be there all night, or somebody on my team is going to be there all night. And we ended up missing a lot of move-ins. There was the friction between the office and maintenance when they were there was always just way worse than it ever was, because the managers felt like, hey, these are people that I can't control. I don't know when they're coming to my property, when they're going. I don't know when somebody's on site. Oh, I need help. This resident's moving in or moving out, and I need to help quickly do something there, right? How many times is there an emergency that comes up in the middle of the day and it's like, hey, Sean, please run to unit 101, right? Whatever that is, I no longer have a Sean that I can text and say, please go run to unit 101, right? I mean, they felt they were high and dry because they didn't know who's on the property, when they're on the property, when they're coming, when they're going. So those are just some of the issues that we had. I don't think they're non-solvable, meaning, I don't know. I don't know. From my experience, I think, there's all these things that we did that in hindsight were the wrong choices that ended up, where we look back and we said, because of this, we're going to go back to a traditional model. But, anything else that I know beyond that is just from what I hear other companies doing. Like you said, there's, one of the largest companies in the industry recently announced that they're kind of, transitioning off the centralized model. So I'm sure, it's not working for them as well. If only they would have asked me for some of my advice beforehand.
You could have saved them
I could
millions of dollars.
Exactly. I could have saved them a few $1 million. But there are companies that reach out to me every so often that says, hey, we're thinking of a model. What do you think we should do or shouldn't do? And I tell them, I can't tell you what to do. I can tell you what not to do.
I have a few thoughts on centralization. I think, first of all, you have to make a difference between institutional. And when I say institutional, you're talking about 100 units and more per property. That's what I call institutional. And small mom and pop, they have 20 units here, 30 units here, 15 units there. For the small mom and pop, like, that is the only way you will run.
100%.
Like, if you haven't done it yet, like, you're doing it wrong.
Operating model, right? That is the operating model for scattered sites is centralized.
You can't afford to assign payroll, a full-time person on a payroll for 20 units or 30 units. Therefore, you're gonna make that full-time position out of pieces. So yeah, another thing that I had a conversation with someone that had smaller assets, I call the mom and pop, the smaller operator. They said, well, in in our model, not only do we centralize, but we specialize. Like I hire a plumber to handle all the plumbing issues. I handle an HVAC guy to handle all the HVAC issues. And then my thinking is, yes, you could do that. And if you want, you could do that into the institutional. But here's August. We're in Atlanta today. It's 94 degrees outside. And then imagine that you do that over 3 or 4 sites that combined have 1,500 units, right? And then you hire one HVAC specialist. No, let's just say you hire 3 HVAC specialists. How do you think 3 HVAC specialists that are very good at HVAC are going to handle the volume of work for 5 properties or 6 or 7, about 1,500 units combined? Because HVAC, it's an emergency when it's 94 degrees outside. You can't just say, well, we didn't get to it, so it's going to be a few days until we get. You have to be in many places at the same time, and there's just not enough bodies, even with a specialization. So that's one situation. The other situation is that I think operators forget that an institutional size property, it's a business that's already been scaled. When you have 100 to 300 units in one place, that's a business that's already been scaled. If you want to extend that to 1,000 or 1,500 units, you're trying super scaling a business. And the mistake that you're making is that the original one property suffers tremendously because things are not run the way they should be. So basically, you're building this super scaling on a foundation of sand. And then instead actually helping, you're multiplying, you're basically amplifying the issues that you had to begin with. Why not solve the issues at the site level, have those run as a Swiss watch, and they take on the challenge to say, now that we've gotten to this point, we have everything in order, we're fully staffed, we're single-digit work orders on a daily basis most of the days, we're caught up on work, our move-ins don't take 2 or 3 weeks, our vacancies, we're not bleeding money on a vacancy loss, we keep them to 5 to 7 days right there. And once you have that for the entire portfolio, yes, go to the next, go for it. But I could promise you that it's going to be very hard to find. And then if you don't have that first thing addressed, then all you do is to just amplify your existing problems.
Yeah, I mean, that was just so well said. I mean, it's again, we spoke. You mentioned this, but offline, you were talking about this, and I was saying, I mean, it's so applicable to every business, every industry, and it's such a basic concept where you could take something that's working and scale it and scale that, right? Where essentially that's what you're doing, right? Like you said, with a centralized maintenance model, where you're when maintenance is working really well and it's under control, then you can say, okay, this worked now. How do I scale this? But if you say, hey, this is not working, now let me scale this, you're going to end up with a larger problem, right? Instead of taking a solution and making a bigger solution, you're now taking a problem and you're scaling the problem, which is such a good point. I mean, like I told you before, something that I always say on the technology side of things, something that's really we lived by as a startup. One of our I guess core values or things that were important to us as we were building the company. I heard Brian Chesky, the CEO of Airbnb, so real estate, also a prop tech company. But I heard him say that one of his early investors told him something really interesting, really unique. If you want to be successful, create a product that cannot scale, right? That won't scale. Create a product around the one person. Create a product around that's just a perfect product. I mean, WhatsApp had an issue. When WhatsApp was starting, they actually didn't want to scale so fast. They wanted to first perfect their product. And they actually, in order to do that, to slow the growth, because it was taking off in a way that they couldn't control, they actually started charging people. So they actually they put a paywall which people were still signing up and paying for it, but it obviously slowed the growth a little bit because WhatsApp didn't want to scale right away. They first had to perfect their product. They first had to take something and say, let's perfect it before we scale it. Obviously, for us as a company, we're doing the same thing, right? We're a startup, and we're saying, before we start scaling something, let's first perfect something, right? We're actually, side note, we're actually at that point now where we've built an incredible product, and now we're focusing on that idea of scaling. But the same thing, I mean, it's sitting there so in front of me. I can't believe that I didn't think of that before. It's such a good point of just like maintenance isn't perfect today. So how could you even think about scaling something that's not perfect? Right. We always thought about centralization, though, and I think maybe this is why, though. I think the industry thinks about centralization as the solution, right? Meaning there's a problem, and well, if we scale it, if we centralize it, we'll fix the problem. But I think it's very different. I think you first have to fix the problem, then you can scale it, and the centralization model is going to give you efficiency. It's going to give you specialization. It's going to give you there's other problems that it will solve. But you first have to have a foundation.
100% in agreement here. I would like to go to employee recognition next. And then gamification. I mentioned earlier when I created the simple, silly Excel spreadsheet where I was manually plugging in the numbers for the most competitive teammates made the entire difference. It made them looking forward to closing 0 work orders at the end of each week. Because, by the way, that didn't just go unnoticed. Every Monday morning, I will send a weekly report to everyone from the president of the company to everybody that had an email in a company. And everybody that had an amazing performance the week prior, they will get shout outs, right? So that's one aspect. Other things that I'm seeing and that actually I'm trying to do too, right? With the leadership council and everything, we try to spotlight our members and great things that they're doing for the industry. These are the social media posts, LinkedIn posts, they get incredible engagement, right? So people, we as human race, we crave this recognition, right? I know that you guys build things about, recognition and gamification. I'd like for you to share some of the things that you see making a difference for the teams at the site level.
Yeah, absolutely. I could talk about what we've created, but I'll talk for right now a little bit more generic about, I think, the impact and the importance of recognition. I think it, like you said, some of your posts on LinkedIn with the highest engagements are the posts where you're just recognizing people. People don't realize it's really easy to recognize people. Right? I mean, there's so much to recognize people for, especially on the maintenance side, right? Run a report who completed the most work orders this week and give them that recognition. I mean, we used to internally, as an operator, we used to have our weekly maintenance spotlight and our monthly maintenance spotlight, where at the end of every single week, we'd look at the leaderboard, the top 3 performing technicians who completed the most work orders that week. They will get a nice spotlight, the most tasks, which include make readies as well. And then the same thing at the end of the month. And we just recognize them. Just, by the way, we're acknowledging you guys were incredible this week, or you guys were incredible this month. And, it could be some companies are scared to do that because they think recognition comes with reward. Whereas, if I'm going to recognize them and say that they're doing an amazing job, I'm now going to have to give them a bonus. I'm going to have to give them something for it. But I think it's the opposite. I think you actually realize the more you recognize them, the less the job becomes about how many dollars an hour I'm making, right? It becomes, hey, this is a company that appreciates all the hard work I do, right? And then when they get an offer for 50 cents an hour more or $1 an hour more, it's like, no, I want to work for a company that values me. So I think that recognition is really important. Now, another thing that I think, though, I think one of the problems that a lot of companies have with their recognition, though, is it could backfire on you. Meaning if I don't have the right data and I end up recognizing the wrong people, right? There's nothing more demoralizing than if I am a hardworking maintenance technician who works my butt off, completes all those work orders, and my maintenance supervisor is the one putting them into the system and taking credit for it. And then I see he gets recognized as, right, one of the maintenance spotlights or something like that, right? So I think that's a big problem that people have to solve, that companies have to solve as part of their, if they want to be able to recognize maintenance, which I think it's not about if you want to. I think you need to if you want to be successful. But companies have to be able to solve that. And again, it's not just AppWork, but us or any digital tool that you're going to use can likely be the solution for that. But I think that's a few points generally about just recognition, and the importance and impact of doing it, but also the consequences if it's done the wrong way. In terms of how we do things, obviously there's just organic recognition. Like you mentioned earlier, we have these ratings, so the technicians know what their ratings are. Those are internal, by the way. We don't share Uber shares the ratings, the driver's ratings with all the passengers. We don't. We keep that internal. So the technician knows what their ratings are at all times, right? I mean, that alone is just, either it's recognition or it's encouragement, right? Whether the ratings are positive, it's, wow, okay, look at me, I'm doing a great job. And then just the system is recognizing them. Or if they're not doing a good job and they have a 3-star rating, which very few people actually have in our platform, interestingly enough, then that's the encouragement. They're going to wake up in the morning and say, okay, I'm 3 stars. Let me get to 4 stars. Let me get to 5 stars. But that's just the most basic level of recognition. We have a really cool program called our badge program, where property management companies can customize and create their own essentially performance badges. They can create a badge, making it up, I don't know, call it an HVAC superstar. And then they can set that badge, in order to earn it, somebody has to complete 150 HVAC work orders. And you could even say 150 HVAC work orders within a certain time frame, within 90 days, right? Or whatever metrics you want. There's an unlimited number of metrics that companies can create. But what our system is going to then do is track every single technician's progress towards earning those badges. And then obviously when they actually earn the badge, our platform will award the badge to the technician. So that is another great concept of gamification, where the system is now motivating the technicians to earn these badges that you set, that you say, hey, here's what I want my team to be motivated towards. Here's what I want to push them to do. And the system is going to now automatically push your team to do that. But we're also creating this really fun component, right? So it's not just that, hey, my team's more motivated to do that. They're more engaged naturally. Now there's a competitive process, right? They're going to be comparing who got more badges, who made further progress on these badges. And then the last part of this badge program is, I think the most impactful part, is where we're now giving the clients, the property management company, tools, right, to now do things with those badges. So, you can have a program where, I don't know, whoever earns the most badges this month gets to take an extra PTO, right? Whatever it may be. We have some clients that, give a $25 bonus for each badge that's earned. We have, companies building all different kinds of incentives, but we have companies that are doing it without incentives. It's just recognition. Every week they give a shout out to anybody. Hey, here's a list of people who earned badges this week, right? And they list the name and the badges that the name of the badge that person earned, and they send it out to the entire company. So it's hey, great news, everybody. Sean earned his HVAC superstar badge this week, right? And Sean feels like $1 million now, right? So that's another concept of what we have for, it's both gamification and recognition kind of, mixed into one. And then there's one more thing that we added on a couple months ago. It's called AppWork Coins. So as operators, we always wanted, one metric to know, how is Sean doing on maintenance, right? How is he doing? And there's so many KPIs to look at. There's how many work orders he completed. There's also his callbacks. There's his ratings. I want to take into account how long he's been with the company for. Maybe I even want to take into account how many badges he earned, right? So there's all these different metrics and KPIs that we have. So the one end, it's, hey, give me a one score, right? I'm making it up, 1,000, 2,000, right? Tell me how Sean's doing. And then on the other end, right, the idea with badges is really cool. But badges, a person only earns, once a month, twice a month, they'll get, right? They're not earning badges every single day. So we wanted to create that instant gratification, where every time somebody does something in our platform, they're going to earn something for it. So every time somebody closes out a work order or a make-ready task or an inspection, they now earn coins. Depending on how hard that task is, they earn bonus coins on top of it. If they get a positive rating, they get even more bonus coins. Where on the other end, though, if they get a negative rating, they lose coins. And it creates this really fun environment where technicians are now competing for who can get the most coins. I know that our clients are building really fun competitions around this, really fun contests, and saying, internally, hey, and, some clients are doing it per market. In this market, whoever gets the most coins, will get something. And it could just be recognition, honestly. It doesn't have to be anything more than that. But we have clients that are doing things. Sometimes we'll do things. So we'll actually actually partner up with a client and say, like, we actually just gave out to one of our clients, we gave them a bunch of PS5s. And we said that I think it was like the top 5 or 6 performing maintenance technicians this month in terms of who has the most coins. We're going to give them actually an AppWork branded PS5, which is a really fun program that we did. So we actually, again, we had the data from our system, and we...
Is that a PlayStation? Yes.
Yes, a PlayStation. Yes, sorry for those that don't. Yes, it's a...
I'm not a gamer, so I had...
Yes, yes, a PlayStation 5. It's one of the... I think they're about to come out with the PlayStation 6 now, I heard. I'm not either a gamer, but so I heard, but I think it's one of the more advanced, really cool gaming consoles. That's not cheap. They cost hundreds of dollars each. But with the coins program, we also, as a company, AppWork has its own standing program with our incredible partners at Chadwell Supplies, where Chadwell Supplies gives out gifts every single month to the top coin earners in our platform. So in addition to whatever the property management companies are doing and whatever we're doing separately with that property management company to help get their teams motivated, encouraged, and engaged, we now have the industry, right? Our industry partners are now also recognizing all that hard work and giving out those gifts. So it's a really cool program, and it's a really great way to recognize, again, the hard work of your maintenance team through gamification.
So shout out to Chadwell for supporting. Basically, what it is, they're taking your data, and then whatever your data says about the top performers, they actually give some prizes to those. They have some giveaways for those particular performers.
Absolutely. They actually go, and in most cases, they're actually going and physically visiting the property, congratulating the maintenance team member that won that and saying, hey, you were one of the top performing maintenance technicians across the entire country in the last month. They do it every single month. They make the team feel like $1 million. They give them their gift. They take some pictures, and it's a incredible program that's really, again, motivating for those team members.
One thing that I want to touch on today also is automation. We talked about this, and it's kind of like not. I mean, like it doesn't really follow the conversation line, but something that I just remember, and I'm very passionate about. Your typical way of printing out tickets, service manager having to do it, and then service manager determining, I'm gonna give this ticket to Johnny or to Jimmy, who's the best fit to actually handle this particular ticket. How can technology... Oh, and there's another situation too, and I'm sure you've seen this as a VP. You're going to a property and you have a whole bunch of guys, hanging out by the shop, and you ask them, "Hey guys, so what's going on? What's up? What's happening here?" Well, nothing is really happening, but we did what the supervisor told us, and we're just waiting for more work. So how can technology eliminate all that dead time and putting so much responsibility on the service manager when that's actually not necessary?
Yeah, it's a great point. I'll start with, again, I can talk for what we do in our platform, but we're not the only ones that do it. There are other companies that do what we do, and I think it's definitely something that every company should be looking at to figure out to what level they can use, and they should be using automation, because I think it's a no-brainer in so many different ways. What we do see though is, within our platform, there's different ways that you can use the automation. You can, so to speak, dial it all the way up to 10, where every time a work order comes in, the system will analyze it, determine, should it be assigned now? Should it wait? If it's assigned, who should it assign it to, and all that kind of fun stuff. And that's, in a way, taking that act of assigning the work orders and managing the work orders off of the maintenance supervisors. So we have some clients that say, great, maintenance supervisors, they don't want to be busy with that anyways. It's just a pain in the neck, and let the system fully automate it. And then we have some clients that say, well, actually, I'm the maintenance supervisor. I want to still be in control. I want to be the one assigning the work orders, and that's totally okay. But then they can kind of dial it down and tell the system when to, so to speak, activate. So for example, with our platform, if and this can be configured individually per property based on the needs of that property, but it could be at, at property A, the system handles all the work order assignments, A to Z. At property B, the system only kicks in if there's an emergency work order that comes in the middle of the day, right? So maintenance supervisor, then in the morning or at night, they go in and they assign all the work orders for the day. But now it's noon and an emergency gets submitted. The supervisor is not going to see that now until either later that night or the next morning when he goes to assign the rest of the work orders, right? So if I want to make sure that gets immediate attention, the second that emergency work order comes in, we can automatically assign it to the best technician to handle it. So that's one scenario where we're ignoring all the regular work orders, only assigning the emergency work orders. Another scenario, like you said, though, and it's something that I've seen more time and time again as an operator, where somebody finishes their work at 3:30, 4 o'clock, and they get off at 5, and the maintenance supervisors, they're busy, they're in units and they're working, and the person says, I'm not going to bother him, I'll just hang around for the next hour until it's 5 o'clock. And they're hanging around the shop, they're hanging around their car, sometimes they're just roaming the property. I don't think they're doing it maliciously. I think they're trying to be respectful of their maintenance supervisor who's in a unit busy with something, and they're just waiting around. So in that case, that's another setting in our platform where you can say only, where auto assign should only kick in if somebody gets below a certain threshold. So for example, only kick in if somebody gets below one work order. So they complete all the work orders, then just assign them one more. So that's another way it could kick in. But you also gain an incredible amount of efficiency from this, something that you don't often do with paper work orders, especially if have a stack of work orders. Are those work orders in order of the age received? Are they in order of units? I can't tell you how many times I've seen two maintenance guys end up at the same unit, each handling different work orders. How much time, you think about it, you're multiplying how much dollars an hour you're paying to a maintenance person, how much time they're spending. You spend between people going to and from the office when they don't need to be, and then obviously going to and from units where it's just so inefficient. People zigzagging throughout the property, right? Where I can say, okay, you handle those work orders, which is all the work orders in this unit and the surrounding units. You handle those work orders, right? I mean, just the level of efficiency that you can accomplish is 10x what companies can potentially accomplish through centralization, right? It's like people are trying to solve centralization when they're just missing some of the things that are so glaringly obvious right in front of them. Is first fix this. Once you fix this, by the way, this is what we were saying before, then you now fixed it. Now I can figure out how to centralize it. But I think there's so much that can be solved with automation. But I also recognize that every property is different, and you have to configure it, and set it and train the algorithm based on what's important to you and how your property operates, and things like that. Yeah.
This is actually stuff the technology does better than humans. Yes. We have to way better, incredibly better, in a fraction of a second too. Right. I'm glad that you're back with us today. What final thoughts do you have for our audience?
I think as just closing thoughts, I would love to. I'm just going to throw this out there. I'd love to sit down and have a broader conversation with some other people that are, some of the other visionaries behind maintenance in the industry, such as Jindu from Happy Co, Ray from Property Meld, Alec from Sweet Spot, and some of the other, again, visionaries behind maintenance technology. I think there's so much that we can talk about together. I think, again, not from a competitive perspective, but more from a problem-solving perspective. I think each of us have a different background. I think each of our platforms solve different problems, and I think it could be really enlightening for us to all sit down, have a conversation, so to speak, the problems that the industry is having.
I would love to host that conversation. I'll be honored. So, visionaries, Alec, Ray, and Jindo, you heard Sean. Sean called you out. So, we'd love to have you and have a very meaningful conversation about PropTech maintenance. I think it's an incredibly important conversation. Hey, Sean, was truly amazing to have you in Atlanta today on a hot 94-degree day. But it's been a real pleasure having you on.
Thank you, Adrian. It's been a pleasure to be here.